Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Bases Loaded right here on OTF. I'm Blake Munroe, where I'm joined each and every week by CJ Vogel and Jeff Howe. And guys, Texas on a roll, it looks like, going to be facing Santa Clara this weekend. But I want to talk about a change this weekend as well. Yesterday, we reported over on ontexasfootball.com that Cade Bean, who's been the Sunday starter up to this point, well, he's no longer the Sunday starter. Dylan Volantis, the true freshman, the left-handed pitcher, will be taking over those duties starting Sunday against the Broncos. Curious to get y'all's thoughts on that.
I think right now is probably the best time to make the change, Blake, because you're right on the cusp of SEC play. So if you wanted to make a change with the Sunday starter, this is typically the time when you do it. Cade Bean, just bottom line, just struggled to throw strikes. I mean, that's not anything that I think needed to be said behind closed doors. I think we could all see that. And, Volantis is interesting. He was headed to USC until he wasn't. It was a really big get for this Texas staff. And, hey, we'll see what happens. Bigger picture for me is, when you start thinking about the SEC tournament and then a regional, and obviously the deeper you get in the NCAA tournament, you need as many capable arms as you can get. So hopefully what comes of this is that Cade Bean works on where he was struggling and that Volantis takes another step, and then you've got two capable arms that you can count on when it gets to postseason once you get later in the year. So like I said, right before SEC play, you've got a non-conference weekend series to do it. Makes total sense to me.
Yeah, I get the original idea, right? I think Bing has more pitch to contact ability, maybe working some to that just let your defense work conversation that we had a week ago. However, when that pitch to contact is now getting barreled up and you're seeing balls land where they shouldn't, you're put in tough spots. The one thing with Volantis that encourages me a lot is he's got 13 Ks right now and 9 2/3. So he's got that put away ability that I think Texas needs whenever they have. Obviously, we see it at times with Spencer and you see it with Harrison. If your Sunday guy can have, 5-6 innings, each Sunday of just get out of jams, strike out guys, don't let the guys that get on early move in advance and then score. You're going to be in a good shape when it comes to winning these back end SEC series. So for Volantis, I think we've seen enough in terms of the put out ability in certain at bats. So I'm for it. Let's see what he can do on the mound, because to your point, that was a big get for Texas. And so far he's been pretty encouraging on the hill.
For sure. It's also worth noting when it comes to the situation as a whole, number one, Bing will move to a reliever role for the time being, I'm told. That might change in the near future. We'll have to see how that plays out. And then one thing I did inquire about, guys, is, I was talking to a couple of team sources, and I said, that's another lefty on the mound. Is this by design? What's going on there? And I was told that, Max basically likes different. And, he likes what he sees from Volantis. Usually left-handed pitchers got something a little bit different. So that was another thing that factored in there, along with, Jeff, what you said, just being not throwing enough strikes. So going to be interesting to see how that all unfolds starting this Sunday.
Yeah, I think, too, Blake, another thing to keep an eye on, and this is just me spitballing, Jason Flores in that Tuesday role, there could, if he keeps doing what he's doing, there could come a point where he could just be valuable to the point where you're going to need him out of the bullpen on weekends. So maybe Cade Bean, like you said, for now goes into that bullpen role. Maybe he becomes your midweek guy and can get back on the right track there. So I think that, to me, though, is more to do with the good we've seen from Jason Flores and the fact that, hey, let's not sugarcoat it. Like, the back end of the bullpen, with the exception of a couple of guys, has struggled of late. So I don't know. It just goes to show you again, it's a long season and there's a lot of stuff that can change between now and then. Other than we pretty much know where Jared Spencer and Luke Harrison are going to be in this deal. Yeah. I think everything else is kind of up for grabs right now.
Yeah, without a doubt. Moving on, and we do this every week right here on Bases Loaded, taking a look at the polls. Of course, not too much of a change, but perfect game still has Texas at 6. USA Today moves them up in the top 10 at 9. D1 Baseball and Baseball America both have Texas at 12. And then NCBWA is the lowest of all the rankings at 15, but we talked about it last week. Those rankings getting a little more in sync, a little closer together. Guys, I don't think there's really any surprise here at all. And perfect game is still a little high, but if Texas continues to win, maybe perfect game looks like they've had it right all along.
Yeah, shoot. We talk about it. It's almost like scoring and diving, right? You just kind of have to take the highest and the lowest, separate them all out, and then take what's remaining of the middle, and that's what your score is. And for Texas to be in that 9 to 12 to 13 range, I think is pretty fair. Of course, the one thing Texas has done very well of is taking care of their business on the field, right? They are winning baseball games, and I think that is something that when you look around to other SEC teams, other area regional rivals, they're not taking care of business. So to continue to win on the field, that has to be applauded at some point for Texas fans. I know, maybe the competition hasn't necessarily been that great, but look, you've played other big Power 4 D1 baseball programs. You've done so in tournament fashion, and you've come away more times than not winning those games. A 10-game win streak is nothing to scoff at, and as a result, you're going to continue to rise. So I'm with the polls. I like that 9 to 13 range, and you start winning again on a consistent basis even more, you're going to continue to see your name rise.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say, and we'll see if this holds to form the rest of the way, this is one of those David Pierce-isms, and I never looked at it like this until he said it, but, if you're going to be in a position where you're going to compete to host a regional, maybe even to get a top 8, the 2 days you've got to take care of business are Sunday and Tuesday. You take care of business on those series finales, because we know, especially, and I think we'll see this in SEC play. I know we saw it in Big 12 play. Once you get to Sunday, you get to that third starter, and maybe you're having to use bullpen guys that either are overworked or haven't pitched all weekend. Sunday games can get wonky, and we know, man. Look, CJ, you've been to enough of them. Blake, you've seen enough of them, man. Some of those Tuesday games can become marathons, especially if you got an opponent and they want to get in 10 different pitchers and get everybody on their staff some work. So those are the 2 games the 2 days of the week where things can get really wonky. So as long as we see Schloss and his team continue to take care of business on Sundays and Tuesdays, the Friday, Saturday stuff will even out, and they'll be all right. But like I said, it's still early, so we'll see if that stuff remains the case as we go forward.
Before we move on, I want to give a big shout out to our friends at Chinook, guys. And obviously, it's baseball season. It's well underway, so be sure to grab you a bag of Chinook. They have 8 unique flavors to choose from. I know you'll find a flavor that you love, whether you're taking them to the ball game or maybe just watching baseball on your couch. Check them out in your favorite store or order online at chinookseedery.com. And last week, I posed the question, should we be worried about the offense? Since I asked y'all that question, Texas has reeled off double-digit games in every single one of them. Their last 4, they've had 10 or more runs. So I think, the bats are getting hot. That question may have been answered. But I want to go to the flip side of that. On the mound, we've seen Texas struggle a little bit mid-game. Should fans be worried about pitching?
For me, not yet, because I think, Max Wiener is still trying to figure out what he's got with some guys during game situations. It's one thing to pitch in inter squads and, when there's nobody in the stands and see how guys respond. But, man, you go in there in a leverage situation and it's going to be high-stress pitches the whole way. You just don't know how some guys are going to react. So I'm not worried about it right now. Is it great? No, obviously not. You look at some of the performances. But to me, Blake, I think this is just a pitching coach still trying to figure out what he's got, and hopefully at some point here pretty soon it starts to settle and guys figure out their roles.
Yeah, I was going to kind of lean on that as well. When you get to those must-win games in the SEC that either decide a series or, you need to win for RPI purposes, do you have the arms available for you to go out and do just that? Right now, I think Texas has 2 really good starters. We'll see how Volantis kind of fits into that Sunday role. But beyond that, I really like what Texas has in Max Grubbs. Obviously, we've talked about Ruger Riojas and Jason Flores. I think those are 3 really solid options out of the back end that you can rely on to come in, get out of jams, put teams away, and close doors on potential comebacks. That's encouraging to know this early 11 games into the season, you've got 3 solid options to come in and really seal the deal for games. So will Texas need more? Absolutely. The one thing I will say that provides a little bit of cautious for me is, hey, we've seen 2 times now where walks, some of these extended innings where, relievers can't find the zone have allowed opposing teams to go on big runs, right? We saw it Friday last week against Washington, and most notably on Tuesday where a 5-run 4th inning put Texas behind going forward. So, those big innings, they've been happening a little bit too much for my liking, but I understand it's early in the season. You're still trying to figure out who's who in your pen, and it's baseball, so it's going to happen. But right now, this early, to know that you got 3 very solid options out of the pen, I'm encouraged by that.
Yeah, Blake, CJ, you mentioned him, Ruby Riojas. I think he's a perfect example of what we're talking about, trying to figure out a role. The reason why I'm not worried about him, he's got 11 strikeouts against 1 walk in 5 appearances.
Yeah.
So throwing strikes isn't a problem. It's just, I think it's figured out, okay, is he more of like a 2-inning guy than maybe a guy who can pitch, extended innings? So I think it's that kind of stuff too that they're trying to figure out. I'll say this, and I'm probably going to jinx him by saying it, so I apologize to the Duplantier family, but Dre has made 4 appearances this season, 7 strikeouts, no walks, and he's yet to give up a run. So that helps when you've got, look, there's not anybody on this roster that's seen as much college baseball as Dre Duplantier has. So you got to remember, like he was a true freshman in 2020. He was on the Texas roster during the COVID year. So he's seen up, down, and everything in between. So I like the fact that you got a veteran arm in your bullpen that you can trust.
Yeah. And I think I've said it every week on here, guys, is that, going into the season, the staff knew that they were going to have to tinker, that they were going to have to play around with pitching, kind of get a feel for these guys, see how it goes. And, I mean, we've seen that really unravel before our eyes. And, yeah, there's been some bumpy spots along the way. But, again, it's early. There's still, brand new coaching staff trying to figure out everything. And, again, you got one of the best pitching coaches in the entire nation on your team. So I'm with you. I don't think that there's too much of a concern right now. Like I said, there has been some bumpy spots, but I have full faith that they'll get it figured out. And a couple of other pitching notes. We've been asked quite a bit about Ace Whitehead, guys. I did some checking in on him. Spoke to a couple of different people. It sounds like it's kind of up in the air, a wait and see type thing. One source was very optimistic that he might return this year, while another one wasn't so optimistic. So I don't know really what to make of that. But I was told that, both the coaching staff and Ace's family want to make sure that he's 100% before going back out there, that they are in no position to rush it. He's not worried about getting back out there, that he wants to be completely healthy. And then the other thing I checked on, been asked quite a bit on Coffee and Football if Grubbs would be the eventual closer, the go-to guy when this is all said and done. And I was told that Texas most likely will not have a traditional closer this year. So 2 important notes right there.
And I think, Blake, you look back to 2021, and I know Aaron Nixon technically was the closer, but I think the beauty of that staff was whether it was Nixon, Tanner Witt. You guys remember what Tanner Witt looked like before all the arm trouble? Good Lord. And Cole Quintanilla. Any 3 of those guys could have come and gotten the last 3 outs of a ball game, even though Nixon technically was the closer. So, I mean, I wouldn't mind a situation like that if you just had 2 or 3 guys that, hey, on a given night, doesn't really matter who's out there. It has to get the last 3 outs. Anybody, any of those guys could be capable of doing it. So I don't know. That's wishful thinking on my part, looking way too ahead. But I wouldn't get too hung up on a closer title, Blake. I think you hit the nail on the head there.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm the opposite there. I kind of like that psyche of one guy knowing that, it's up to him to come in, close the door wherever the situation unfolds, whether it's home, whether it's on the road, to know that, hey, I've got the stones to come in regardless of who I'm facing, where I am, to know that I'm the guy that's responsible to close the door. I kind of like maybe Maybe I'm in the minority there, but it doesn't hurt to have options. I'll say that. But I kind of like just knowing that, hey, that guy in the back pen, you don't talk to him until the 8th inning when you tell him to warm up, and then he comes in and does his thing, right? So, again, that's why I'm sitting here talking to you guys. So we'll see.
No, hey, there's something to be said for that, CJ. You look at, Texas, the last 2 national championship teams we've seen, and even, when Corey Knebel was on campus, I mean, you had a lot of comfort knowing that Houston Street's coming in to get you the last 3 outs. You took comfort in knowing that Jay Brent Cox is coming out of the bullpen to get you the last 3 outs. So, and we've seen some really good closers at Texas over the years. But not having a bona fide closer doesn't preclude you from making a pretty deep run in Omaha. So, the bottom line for me is I'm enjoying seeing some pitching development from Max Wiener. I mean, not just the guys that they brought in, but some of these guys were, David Pierce recruits that they inherited, that Jason Flores was one of those guys. So I just like the fact that we're talking about pitching in terms of, hey, which of these group of guys can close a game, not, all right, do you have more than like 2 capable arms in the bullpen going into a weekend? So it's a really nice change of pace.
Mm-hmm.
All right, guys, we will close with this. Texas right now, 10-1. I mean, you look at the schedule before SEC play begins, Santa Clara, and then UTA on Tuesday. So, I mean, honestly, a solid chance to get to 14-1 before conference play really gets underway, because then they have Mississippi State, LSU, and, we all know it gets very tough. But my question to y'all is, did you, at the beginning of the season, did you honestly think that Texas would be in a position to be 14-1 heading into conference play?
Oh, I don't think I did. I think that they would be in a position very similar to this, but 10-1. Look, college baseball is a tough game, right? We've seen the number 1 team in the country lose 4 straight games, right? Losses happen, especially early on. And I think we've become a little privy to that early on. These Tuesday games, to your point, Jeff, become these marathons that you're just like, I don't know how many runs are going to be scored in each frame. So, look, 10-1 is nothing to be, to look at and say, oh, okay, this is where I think this is the expectation. But again, the bat's awakening, the arms coming together. I think this is kind of where you want to see the team building that momentum, when the conversation just a week ago was who's going to join an A-Rod, a Baloo, in a Mendoza as the top 3 in your lineup. And all of a sudden you look back and you're like, oh, it looks like Tommy Farmer's figured out. Jalen Flores, Rylan Galvan's now up to 14 RBIs. And, of course, Will Gasparino sitting right there with 4 homers, 4 runs batted in as well. You got plenty of options there. So more than just the win-loss record, you're seeing everything kind of come together as, okay, the Sticks are coming alive at a great time. Blake, you mentioned the double-digit runs scored in 4 straight games. In the arms, we just mentioned the starting rotation, as well as some really solid options out of the back end. Win-loss record aside, seeing how this team is kind of gelling early on, I don't think you could be much more pleased with that right now.
I'll tell you what I like, Blake. I appreciate a team that can give up some big innings like Texas has given up. I mean, you go back to the Washington game, or they did it against Illinois. They did it on Tuesday against Corpus. Right. But I appreciate a team that can give up a big inning, flush it, and then come back with one of their own. So this team's got some grit. I mean, they got something to them. So I appreciate that much of it. Obviously, you hope they take care of business this weekend against Santa Clara. And then, it starts with SEC play. And, Mississippi State, this is not the same Mississippi State team that, Texas couldn't put away in Omaha in that winner take-off semifinal in 21. But you start looking at, and I know we'll talk more about this next week, but you start looking at Mississippi State's losses. It's Arizona has been ranked this year. Oklahoma State's ranked. Troy's been ranked. Southern Miss is a really good program. I'll fly that Sun Belt flag as proudly as anybody for Sun Belt baseball. But I mean, that's anytime you're going to Starkville to play a game, I mean, they're going to pack the house and be really rowdy, especially, maybe a top 10 Texas team going in there. So you really just hope this weekend, you expect 3 wins, yes, but clean baseball, throw strikes, limit the free passes, no errors. I know that drives all 3 of us crazy when we just see teams kicking the ball around on the infield. So this is your last chance really to get it cleaned up and get some of the chinks out of the armor before you jump into SEC play.
Hey, this weekend should also be if I remember correctly, the first time this year where the Dish will have some nice weather for some baseball. So if you're in the Austin area and it's not going to be 30-mile-per-hour wind gusts like it was Tuesday, it's not going to be freezing like it was a week and a half ago. It was a good time to get out there and go see how this team looks in person.
Yeah, I mean, maybe before the basketball game against OU on Saturday, maybe go across 35 and check out some baseball. I'm just saying.
You might as well. You'll already be there. And if you can't make it, then those games will be on the SEC Network this weekend, SEC Network Plus. All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of Bases Loaded. A big shout out to Chinook for helping us out on this. And for Jeff Howe and CJ Vogel, I'm Blake Munroe, and we'll see you next week.